My job takes me all over the place as a security guard. The mall is one possible location, the racecourse or a downtown office building are other possibilities. My supervisor gets to choose my itinerary. To be honest, I don't really care either way. Since it's essentially the same thing everywhere, I have no problem with it. However, there was a single exception. As a security guard, I worked for 2 weeks at a Starbucks. It would make sense if you saw the location of this Starbucks, even though you may never have seen a professional security guard at one before. It would be an understatement to say that this home was located in a tough neighborhood. Numerous robberies occurred. Mutukes occurred frequently. Almost every day, you could make out the distant sound of gunfire. Having said that, the service at this Starbucks was top-notch. Specifically, I had a great rapport with Emily, who worked as a barista. She had short pink hair, glasses, and was around 25 years old. She had a stockier physique and stood at an average height. During our breaks, we would occasionally converse about nothing in particular, such as current events, celebrity rumors, or any number of other mundane topics. My typical vantage point was right by the front door, so I could see everything. Along one wall, you could see those bar stool-style chairs, and at least 5 or 6 tables were arranged around a lengthy counter. Additionally, Emily and the other baristas were stationed in the service area that was situated on the distant wall. A man came in while I was at my post. He wore worn-out clothing and had long, grey hair. I detected the odor of alcohol on his person the moment he entered the room. His behavior demonstrated that he'd overindulged in alcohol. He walked over to the counter where Emily was working. Just by seeing her expression, I could discern that she was uneasy. Of course they would. But he wasn't doing anything, so I refrained from interfering. From across the store, I could make out their chat. "I'm going to get a coffee," he declared. "No problem, sir. Will there be anything else?" She spoke up. Instead of speaking, he merely gazed at her while intermittently licking his lips. With eyes that begged for rescue, Emily glanced over to me. After taking in enough information, I sneaked up behind the man. A harsh, "Sir, it's time to go," was my expression. He continued to obsess on Emily, ignoring me. To make it clear that I was dead serious, I put my hand on his shoulder. In an instant, he pivoted to face me. He flashed me a smile as his decaying teeth protruded from his mouth. He went from smiling to scowling furiously, and it showed in his eyes. I retreated a step, ready for his next move. With deliberate motion, he retrieved a huge knife from his belt and brandished it towards me. Fear paralyzed me. I don't really know how to defend myself, to be quite honest. Not even a weapon is in my possession. Acting as a deterrent to individuals like this is actually more my responsibility. In a real, life-or-death scenario, I am helpless. My heart rate was through the roof as we stood there for what felt like an endless period. The lovely, increasingly loud sound of a police siren eventually reached my ears. My guess is that Emily called 911. He sprinted out the front door as soon as the man with the knife saw. He was apparently only given a slap on the wrist, some sort of community service or probation, after the police caught him. The crime rate in this neighborhood is woefully inadequate. Evidently, they overlook incidents like this because there is a lot of it. I suppose technically no one was wounded, but it's terrifying to think that people can act in such a way and then wind up back on the streets.
I struggled to get work relevant to my degree after graduating from college. After months of sending out resumes for various positions, I finally got a handful of replies. Time passed, and I started applying for jobs that had nothing to do with my major. In the end, I decided to work as a barista at the Starbucks near me. While I was out looking, I thought it would be plenty to cover my expenses. My pride took a beating because I went to college for 4 years for a job I could have done in high school. Having said that, I must confess that I thoroughly enjoyed my initial shifts. I adore the aroma of a freshly brewed pot of coffee, and I've always been a heavy coffee user. In addition, my co-workers were fantastic. During the shop's slower hours, the other baristas would crack jokes and chuckle. There were a lot of frequents at this establishment. Not everyone who came in used the free Wi-Fi, some were students, and some were regulars who came in many times a day for their caffeine fix. On the other hand, there was a particularly bothersome regular customer. The type of person who can always find fault with anything is familiar to you. The lights were either too dim or too bright, and his coffee was either too hot or too chilly. Cutting in line was another one of his vices. It was as if he believed he were above the law. He once pushed aside a kind old lady and cut in line. I couldn't take it anymore. Indeed, Lyle, I approached him and declared, "Get out of here." "What? That is not the way you should address me." He retorted, "I am your most valuable client." In response, his round face was bedecked with sweat beads. As his fury intensified, his heart rate quickened. "I witnessed your actions. Leave immediately or I will contact the authorities," I warned. I was determined to stand firm. He clenched his jaw and raised his arms in protest. It made me think of a tantrum a child might have when hearing no for the very first time from their mother. For fear that he may lunge at me, I gingerly stepped back. At that very moment, he seemed to relax and put his arms down. After that, he added with a hint of sarcasm, "You're indeed correct. My apologies, I will not obstruct your path." Something was off with his delivery, as if he were trying to hint that it was far from done. I would almost rather have a completely insane person than one who keeps their rage bottled up and ready to burst at any second. With the former, at least, you are prepared. I was too busy to be concerned about him though. It made me pleased when he departed. 3.5 more hours of my shift passed interminably. It was already 9 o'clock when I finally shut down. Alice, a co-worker of mine, and I went out the front door together. The parking area was completely black, and our car stood alone. Mine was on the opposite side from hers. Unaware of what was ahead, I cautiously approached my automobile. About 10 feet distant, I peered out the back window and saw two eyes staring at me. Somebody was ducking behind my vehicle. Lyle was the only possible candidate. I was worried he would act aggressively if he realized I was staring at him, but he didn't appear to notice. "Hey Alice, I believe I have your car keys," I shouted to Alice. This is what came out, and I apologize if it seems illogical. To go to her car, I strode over. As I drew near, a bewildered expression spread across her face. I informed her that I saw a figure lurking behind my vehicle and that I suspected it was the irate man from before. Because I was afraid he may do anything if he realized we were looking at him, I told her not to. I was promised a transport home that night by Alice, and I was to return the following day to retrieve my automobile. If I had failed to detect the twinkle in his eye, I cannot fathom what may have transpired. I was genuinely scared by the fury I perceived in him. Who can say what a man would do in a dark, empty parking lot if he couldn't manage his anger in a crowded place? It was quite close.